Hello, everybody. This is Carol Maletta. Welcome to the Parenting 411 podcast, where we share information parents need from sources they can trust. In the throes of the back-to-school season. In some parts of the U.S., school has started, and in others, families are still busy preparing for the big day. We see the usual signs, the shopping for school supplies, and maybe some new clothes and kicks for the kids, and of course, the first day of school posts on social media. It almost looks like things are back to normal, except they really aren't. Along with the eager anticipation some students may have of going back to school and seeing their friends and the teachers that they love and adore, there's also apprehension in many cases. And it can be tiresome to keep talking about or hearing about the pandemic, but the truth is it's still here and its impact is very much with us. We also cannot ignore the security concerns that many schools have in the wake of mass shootings that over the past few years, including the horrific Uvalde, Texas incident. There's just a lot to process, and it's understandable if the kids aren't, quote, over it. We have to help them through it. But how? Today, I am joined by Taharka Sankara of Counseling Support Services, LLC. He is a trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapist, as well as a certified anger management treatment provider. I couldn't think of anyone better to speak with us right now to gain insight about how you can help our young people sort through their thoughts, their feelings, and their emotions to find a way forward after the traumas that they have faced in recent years. So welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today, Taharka.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. So good.
Good. So why don't we just hop in and tell a little bit more about yourself? I like to give folks an opportunity to brag a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. You mentioned I work in the field. I'm licensed as a clinical social worker, and I'm also licensed as a clinical alcohol and drug counselor, and a trauma-focused cognitive behavior therapist. So professionally, I consider myself a behavioral mental health consultant. That's what I do. And I'm also an author. I have several works like essays and articles that I've published that's out there. And I'm also a public speaker who speak to parents, groups, organizations on areas of stress, trauma, and other behavioral mental health issues and concerns that people may have. A lot of my focus of the work that I do centers on children and families. And so I'm currently a managing member of one agency based out in New Jersey that contracts with the state that the children's system of care, and they authorize services to go in-home and into the communities with children and families to work with them one-on-one directly to address some of the trauma experience they may have, as well as other related behavior and mental health challenges. So in a nutshell, that's what I do. That's who I am. And I operate from the center of children are the reward of life. That's an African proverb from the Congo, and children are definitely the reward of life. And I look to see that reward flourish and blossom.
I like that so much. And we absolutely have to treat them like the reward and the blessings that they are. And then, of course, they are our future. They're going to keep civilization going. They're the next generation. So absolutely, I love that they are the reward of life. Now, I can really imagine that your services are in high demand right now. And so I wonder, how has your work changed in terms of before the pandemic and since? And then also talk a bit about what you might be hearing about concerns about safety in school, in addition to any remaining concerns about the pandemic.
Right. Yes, definitely. I would have to say that my experience has been intensified like high demand. I think the pandemic has encouraged and compelled people to seek out services because some of the stresses that they may be experiencing just from like being at home, maybe family loss, grief challenges, some of the intensity of parenting in the environment, and seeking turning parent into teacher, right? Where sometimes there's a lot of parents who really not into that service. They just want to parent and allow the school to be the teacher. So I see an intensified stress. I see some offshoots or some other factors that come into play, like electronic use. It has increased because a lot of things are online. A lot of children are occupying their free time online, and sometimes as parents, you just want to allow them to, give you a peace of mind, and sometimes the electronic use gets out of hand. Scheduling becomes more flustered and unstructured in a
Mhm.
sense. So that's some of the challenges that I'm experiencing as different. Intensity of that stress, it may manifest itself in more anger related issues, parent
Mhm.
child conflict issues,
Mm.
um, you know, more boredom definitely, because of the isolation. And so I would say significantly, those are some primary areas that have changed in the work that I do.
Mhm.
And to follow up on the follow-up question, you was like two-part there. So help me out with the second part.
Oh, well, I was just wondering how your work has changed from what you did before the pandemic to after. So you pretty much answered that. And there was something that you mentioned that I wanted to spend a little more time on, and that was electronics and how children are just kind of retreating more into that world to escape the stresses of the real world, and how many parents are sort of allowing it. What do you think? What have you been talking about regarding that?
Well, it's important, very important to regulate it. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
have a schedule around social use,
Mm-hmm.
electronic use, whether that's video games, whether that's social media,
Mm-hmm.
YouTube, or whatever the case, to regulate it. So the American Pediatric Association, they actually changed their regulation because of the changes in our society, and so they've increased the time, knowing that children are doing things online, they're learning online, they're playing online, and understanding that there's going to be more use, and so that's very important to have that regulated. Have a set schedule of when they wake up, when they go to bed. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of children I find are spending, the night hours. They're like night owls, and they're staying up overnight on phone gaming, and that's how they're communicating with their associates through these mediums, and to stay social. But it's also depriving them of some critical elements that they need to be healthy, which is rest.
Mm-hmm. Rest and actually just the practice of real world social interaction. And I like what you're talking about. I think it is so important to have a schedule and to have some discipline, self discipline around how we engage with electronics and social media and all of that. And I believe that this is a great time to teach children that things are going to happen. Like, the pandemic, excuse me, the pandemic is not really over, or the fact is we're going to continue to live with things like the coronavirus and just their variants, and there are going to be other plagues that will be upon us that we will have to live with. And just in general, life is going to happen. There are going to be other things that happen that stress us and upset us. And it's really about teaching them how to take control over what they can control. And so their schedules with rest and schoolwork and entertainment and having fun, those are all things that they can manage. And I think that stress will decrease significantly if you realize that there are some elements you can control. What do you think about that? We'll be right back after this. You love your kids. You do your very best for them. But sometimes it feels like it's just not enough. And you're so sure you're the only one who feels this way. The truth is, you're not alone. It is also true that there are some things you're doing quite right. And there's a community who would love to exchange ideas with you. I'm Carol Maletta, creator of the Parenting 411, a portal for parents where I share information parents need through webinars and masterclasses. And not only that, the parents there support each other on this amazing journey in the Parenting 411 community group on Facebook. I can't wait to meet you in the community. And we're back with the Parenting 411.
Once you realize you can control it, that every problem has a solution. And once we recognize that every problem has a solution, then we start to search and find for the solution rather than focusing on the problem. So there's different things that a person can do, that parents can incorporate. So I highly recommend parents to control their environment, right? That home is the first environment, that home is the first school, the first training ground, the first playground. And the more that we incorporate the things that are required for our children to remain healthy, the more healthy they'll be. So that is something that is important. So I function from six critical areas, right? We spoke about the rest point. But my work comes out of the trauma research, and what I find that is health practice and well-being practice. And if you want to regulate yourself and help your children regulate, to incorporate these six critical strategies are very important. And so I'll just run through them real quick, and I'm sure
Sure,
we
I'd
will
love to hear it. Yes.
discuss some more. But it's simple and it's practical, right? It's not far reaching, it's not high shelf. It's just viable things we can do on a regular basis in that controlling our environment and structure. So one is typically like the diet, right? The food is our medicine, and the medicine is our food. So what our children consume, and that's another thing. During this time, children diets have changed. They become more reckless, more snack food, junk foody, because they're online. They don't want to eat at specified time. So diet is very important. We spoke about the rest because that's important for us to regulate that, to get the reset, the reboot, allow the body to naturally does what it needs to do during that period of rest. Exercise, body movement. And so that'll break up some of that television time, that game time, to get the body moving, exercise. And it doesn't take much. You could do that in the house. You could do that on the porch, in your yard, or in front. Right. There's certain things that you can also do related to just sitting still. They call it mindfulness, right?
Okay.
Just being aware, allowing yourself to steady, to focus, to think a little bit and process some things that may be going on. And is relationship building, which involves a lot of communication, connection. And relationship is known to produce some of the healthy natural hormones that the brain creates for us. And so the stronger our relationships, the better they are, the healthier they are, the healthier we are as people. So paying attention to how we relate to one another, and that's very important. And lastly, I would say the critical strategy is having an outlet of therapeutic support, counsel, or some type of coaching, some type of advisory, people you can use as a support system, of a professional nature, because there may be some things that you may not have the answer to. You may not know where to search for the answer, and a professional can usually help in that area, and not being afraid to reach out and connect with a professional. So those are six critical strategies that anyone and everyone can do, and generally it doesn't cost us much, but some time and focus to do those things.
Yes, absolutely. And there are just several things that you talked about that when we started, when we first had the shutdown, I immediately thought that this is a great reset. I just hate that there was a virus out there that brought this on. But basically, we needed a reset, and it was a reset that everyone had to take, because I find that we're so competitive, and sometimes people hesitate to slow down and take care of themselves or take care of their families because they're worried about other folks getting ahead. But this was something that everyone had to respect. And so I immediately thought that relationships would really benefit, because parents are pulled in so many different directions. Our children are pulled in so many different directions with school, after school activities, all of these other things that they need to be in, because they want to make sure they're prepared for college when that comes, or whatever, just the next thing. And so I thought that that was a great time to really nurture relationships, reconnect. And that is something that I heard a lot in my radio interviews and podcast interviews during that time, because even as we talked about whatever the guest's particular expertise was, we always kind of came back to, so how's your family doing? How are you all doing in the midst of this? And that was something that came up a lot, that it was stressful initially because of having to manage school and all of that. But then it was great to reconnect with their children. And so I I had no idea, none of us did, how long this shutdown would last and how long this new way of operating would last. But I said, whenever it's over, don't go back to business as usual. I mean, that's actually pretty much going to be the title of this episode. Is back to school, but not back to business as usual, because there's so many things that we learned about our children, about ourselves, and we need to carry that forward, because there are going to be other challenges. And even if there aren't any challenges, they're good practices to carry forward. This list of 6 things that you talked about, there doesn't need to be a pandemic to practice these things. So I appreciate that. I absolutely am going to include this list in the show notes. So now I wonder if you could share some signs that parents might need to look for when in determining whether their children are in fact still struggling, with their mental health in this time.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And real quick, you mentioned something that back to the old way or back to the norm. And I
Right.
often tell parents and children, like, listen, that normal that you once knew is no longer. Like, we're in a new normal and we must make the adjustments to continue to move forward and not look to kind of get back to that, but get to the new you, the new space and time that we're actually operating in. And that's mental health, right? Being oriented
Mm-hmm.
to the realities in which you exist. And so that's very critical. But yeah, um, some common signs, and I would say the signs are generally they really haven't changed. It's just really about monitoring what your child is exhibiting.
Okay.
So one thing again, sleep patterns, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
they're sleeping longer hours, they sleeping is disrupted, they not getting a full night's sleep, um, things like their cognitive functioning, right? They're appearing to be disoriented or just like starry-eyed and blank faced, numb to
Mm-hmm.
things, paying attention to those things, behavioral issues. So now, and this is the challenge because children present behaviors, right? And
Mm-hmm.
challenges. Normal childhood development presents these challenges. However, if you notice that they're being exacerbated, like intensified, they're staying around for longer periods of time, then you may want to consider seeking some help. Uh, you know, I would say what is excessive would be worry, right? Which can be indicators of anxiety of something. So now there's a normal worry that all children may have, like you said. We coming out of or still in the pandemic, different challenges. And then there's the new monkeypox thing that's going on. The school related violence, mass shooting, things that increase worry and concern for both parents and the children. But with the children, if there's like this intense or extra fear about going back to school, there may be some other things that need to be addressed that as we move forward. So that excessive worry and anxiety about what the future may hold, this fear mechanism that starts to drive our functioning and our behavior. Maybe if you start to notice more isolation, I tell parents, like, no matter what age your children are, no matter how old they are, if they still live in your home, you know, they have their privacy, but don't allow them to close their door for too long to just be free and do them like they're grown. Um, yeah, like they're grown. So because that allows them to isolate and they start to do things and they start to connect with things and people and start to develop different types of identities and behavior patterns, attitudinal patterns. So now they're interacting with you differently. So pay attention to those things. If they're trying to isolate, they don't want to go outside much. Those can be signs of like depressed mode that they kind of withdrawn from the normal day activities. And if you have an intense or increase in your parent-child conflict or disruption, and so those are some common things. I mean, I think they always exist and things
Mm-hmm.
that parents should be monitoring for. But
Mm-hmm.
I think the level of intensity, the duration
Mm-hmm.
of it will also be an addition to what we're going through now. And so if some of those signs you start to see, definitely reach out for some professional support so that they can provide some additional guidance.
Okay. So, what kinds of tools and resources do you recommend parents use to work with their children and just to improve some of these things?
One tools and resources, again, like I like to be very practical, not to make it hard for parents to think they have to do a whole lot.
Okay.
I think one critical tool is communication tool. Right, the communication tool is the key to any relationship with your child or people for that
Mm-hmm.
matter. I find that a lot of parents, maybe because of their stressors, because there's work related stress that may be going on, there's relationship stress, what's going on, there's school stress that's going on, and oftentimes the communication is lost,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there's aggressive communication. Again, it could be passive communication, not paying attention, not following up, not probing. So using the tool of communication is very important.
Mm-hmm.
A tool I also like to give parents is like using daily check-in scales, 0 to 10, right?
Okay.
On health and wellness. So
Mm-hmm.
in your conversation with them, checking in like how you feeling today, how you doing today, and give me a rating, right? 10 meaning you're absolutely the greatest you ever felt, you're happy, you're excited, you're joyful, and 0 is like, things are not good for me.
Okay.
And having a baseline for that, and the best way to do that is checking on a daily basis regularly, and even
Mm-hmm.
sometimes throughout the day as time goes by. But using
Mm-hmm.
that as a fundamental tool, you can always use that. You don't have to do much with that, right? You could just
Sure.
give me a score, give me a rating, how you feeling today, and then you
Mm-hmm.
can go from there, right? You can
Mm-hmm.
help coach them from there, what we can do next. um and a basic tool again is scheduling consistent and predictable routines, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a tool, structuring your time, structuring their time, your day, meal time, sleep time, game time,
Mm-hmm.
fun time, and then
Right.
being consistent as possible with that. And lastly, I would say like the tool, which is the 6 critical strategies that we already spoke about,
Mm-hmm.
to use those things as the primary tools of focus.
Now, do you have different ideas about what teachers could be doing to help students feel comfortable in school and within the classroom and with just within the school environment in general?
Yeah. Um, one of the things that I find is that sometimes as a teacher, as the professional, we may not necessarily take care of ourselves as we
Mm.
should.
Mhm.
And so one way that teachers can support, educators can support children in that environment is being more aware of how they are internally, like how are they taking care of themselves so that their stressors, their frustrations aren't transferring into the school. Because there's also a thing called um what they call mirror neurons, and it supports co-regulation,
Mhm.
right? You know, like how we feel, we emanate an energy, and it allows other people to start to feel similar ways. And
Mhm.
so teachers being more aware of what they can do to ensure that they're co-regulating with their students, so taking care of themselves can help. Being able to check in again, this is a check-in point, so teachers can also use check-ins on a daily basis.
Mhm.
um Being able to structure an environment, keep an environment calm, not
Mhm.
too rigid in the
Mhm.
environment. And, you know,
Mhm.
because understanding that there needs to be some flexibility, and sometimes protocol uh, doesn't necessarily allow that. And the
Mhm.
check-ins will be able to elicit how children are doing. And sometimes I think subject matter may not necessarily be the topic of discussion for the day, because children may need more social emotional regulation for that
Mhm.
day, for that time. Like you
Mhm.
mentioned earlier, like the school shooting. Um, so that may come up for children, and so what are we gonna say? Like, oh, don't worry about that, don't think about that. We have to do this
Mhm.
math subject. We have to do this English exercise.
Mhm.
No, right? You may have to time out and say, hey,
Mhm.
listen to the students. What are they saying? Because the healthier they are, the better they feel, the more they can learn, right?
Absolutely.
And the easier the information can transfer back and forth. So those are some things I would say: creating an environment that's more nurturing
Mhm.
rather than punitive. So how you set up the classroom,
Mhm.
making it more relational. You know, like we have a traditional classroom setting, which is rank and file seating
Mhm.
patterns, and
Oh, yes.
right, that is that rank and
Right.
file, like, you know, um, and I would say moving forward for a more transformative approach, more trauma-informed approach, more communal approach, because connection is really what's needed to help us thrive. So, maybe using a circular pattern if they can,
Mhm.
right? Or a
Sure.
U-shaped pattern
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
allow students to feel more communal, right?
Mhm.
And it prevents children from hiding in the back,
Mhm.
isolating in the classroom. Everyone can see each other, and it is more closely interactive, I would say.
Sure. I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Yes, I like that a lot. So let's talk a bit about the experiences that Black and Brown students have had in this moment. Both, whether you want to talk about how they fared during the pandemic, but then also the racial unrest, and also they too have to contend with their fears about just their safety in school.
Yeah. That's a major one. And oftentimes I would say, you know, in practice, I find that the subject of race is really not race. Culture is like mentioned, but
Mm-hmm.
it's really not addressed.
Mm-hmm.
And so black children, you know, brown children, like there's an additional layer to the
Mm-hmm.
stress, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we speak about just normal stress that children are going through, coming back, going to school, some of the challenges they may face, but as you mentioned, there's a additional layer that needs to be addressed, and is identified as race-based traumatic stress. So now we're speaking about more trauma stress that are constantly going off, a heightened alertness, right? Hypervigilance,
Mm-hmm.
um, a difficulty communicating what's going on inside because they're unregulated, right? Feeling targeted in the school setting, right? Some of the behavior patterns may be different in how they're expressed. So oftentimes there's disciplinary factors that's immediately used, and there's a disparity there. They always coming out with studies and researching this thing, and the pattern remains the same. And so I think that understanding that race and culture is an important element that needs to
Mm-hmm.
be spoken about, and allowing again children to verbalize and express their experiences and not neutralizing their experience as if it's irrelevant. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's things going on with across the country, changes in curriculum, far as what they want to start including in the curriculum, and there's
Mm-hmm.
battles around that. And I think, oftentimes the student isn't really considered in regards to that process. So
Mm-hmm.
um, we have to understand that we're here as guides for the
Mm-hmm.
students, for our
Right.
children, um, and oftentimes they have answers for for the
Yes.
problems, right? And so we have to listen to that. And some of the changes in curriculum are as I'm finding, as I'm hearing from the families that I'm dealing with, there's some things that's going on that's changing that they're really not in agreement with.
Mm-hmm.
And so um being able to hear that, um and listen to that, and make decisions based on what the families, what the children are actually saying.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Moving forward for Black children, brown children, non-white children going back into the school setting. Because traditionally it's the curriculum we can say is Eurocentric
Sure.
curriculum, right? Is Euro oriented. So there's some critical things that need to go on there.
Mm-hmm.
Like this thing called critical race theory. There's a
Sure.
battle about that, right? And why, right? So those are some
Mm-hmm.
biases, unhidden biases. What we call in sociology, they call it the hidden curriculum, right? Like there's things that go on that are not in black and white, pen and pad, book,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but there's things that people do, how they function, how they think, how they teach, how they
Mm-hmm.
relate to the student, that impacts that learning and capability.
Yes. And, that can certainly create severe mental health crises in Black and brown children. That part about the curriculum and, this battle. I mean, the interesting thing is that critical race theory would not be taught in K through 12. I mean, but people are just kind of equating critical race theory with basic history. Like, just teach the history of this country. No, I don't think I think most parents would agree it's not critical race theory that they want taught. Just teach the history. I mean, just do that. And the longer that you hide that, not only do uh, Black and brown children feel unseen and unheard in the school setting, but also for white children that you are hiding this, it makes it more something to be ashamed of and to perpetuate this whole thing, this whole narrative. I mean, because that's, I believe, a lot of what's going on outside of school and, just in the broader picture on the political landscape and all of that other stuff. It's just not wanting to deal with this. And the thing about the truth is, it's always going to keep chasing you. So
Yeah, yeah.
we'll be right back after this. As the saying goes, mother's work is never done, except when it really is. I'm talking about my new book, Mother's Work: Pearls of Wisdom and Gems from My Journey. I share my transformation from an outmanned, overwhelmed mom of twin boys to a parenting strategist and consultant, and being honored as DC Mother of the Year by American Mothers Incorporated. In Mother's Work, I tell you about the 7 guideposts that kept me anchored as I weathered the peaks and valleys of motherhood. Grab your copy at carolmaletta.com/motherswork. And we're back with the Parenting 411.
But they say one thing, right? That the truth hurts, but the truth also heals,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And one of the elements I read it the other day. I'm not quite sure. In one state, somewhere there, language in that curriculum, right? So teaching history. So one element was language about slavery, enslavement. So now, it's about involuntary relocation.
Oh,
Uh,
goodness, yes.
yeah, yeah. So these little elements, like to kind of like wipe away and clean the slate, and is not healthy, right?
It's
Because
not.
now again you're attempting to function in a reality that's disconnected from the reality.
Sure, absolutely. And it just comes back to the truth. It comes back to our history. And critical race theory is actually a higher level kind of thinking, a higher level kind of looking at the systems of racism and oppression. And that doesn't belong in K through 12, but history does.
Correct. Correct.
American history does.
Right.
So as we wrap up, what is something that you're feeling good about? I mean, despite what we've been through, what are you seeing that gives you some hope that the work you're doing is making a positive difference in the lives of the children and families that you serve?
One of the things I would say is that, um, more educators, more professionals are, becoming receptive to changes that need to be made. I was
Mm-hmm.
recently in a training with a bunch of educators. Again, it was a mindful training. We did a lot of breath work. We did a lot of yoga, meditation, and how they can incorporate these things into the classroom setting. Right,
Mm-hmm.
like all it takes is a few minutes. Like classroom open up, the bell rings. When
Mm-hmm.
children settle down, one of the ways to get them to settle down is to maybe engage in some brief breath work, right?
Mm-hmm.
To help the body reset, to recalibrate, and begin to focus in on what needs to happen in instruction. So I think as more schools, more teachers become aware, become more trauma informed in their approaches to how they relate to students, how they deliver the curriculum, and understanding that we all can play a part in helping a young person or another person heal just by our, again, co-regulation.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're in front of the classroom, we have the ability to regulate the classroom, regulate the students. And it may not necessarily happen the first day, the second day, but consistency with implementation will do a lot. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
glad to see that. I'm glad to see that more parents and families are receptive as well to
Mm-hmm.
seeking help. Again, I have increases in contact for services, so definitely more families are reaching out and requesting some support. So I'm
That's
proud
wonderful.
about that. I'm happy to be a part of that, to be a part of that transformation. All right,
Good.
to utilize my skills in that type of way. So
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. So, how can our listeners learn more about you? How can they follow you on social media?
Oh yeah. So I'm on all social media platforms, right? Taharka Sankara or Counseling Support Services. I don't know the actual address, but
Okay.
Counseling Support Services, Taharka Sankara, Taharka Speaks. That's more of my public speaking, where I speak to
Mm-hmm.
organizations and groups. Um, or simply, you can contact me through there, through my website, counselingsupportservices.com.
Okay.
There's a way to contact me through there, and I can give phone number, right? The phone number 732-272-1340. And
Mm-hmm.
those are the best ways to communicate with me, make contact with me, and we will get back to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
To help and
Mm-hmm.
support you and guide you and answer any questions. Because a fundamental message that we send is that counseling support services is about the puzzle pieces of life and
Mm-hmm.
helping you put those things back together again. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're ready and you're looking to put some things back in order, put them back together, then you can definitely contact me through those platforms.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I hope that our listeners will take advantage of that and will reach out to you through the various means, social media, your website, your phone number. That makes it really easy, very direct. So that's great because you have a tremendous store of knowledge about the topic, about good mental health for families and for young people. So I really do hope that they take advantage of it. And I also thank our listeners for tuning in again. I am so excited to be back, starting off another season. And of course, I couldn't think of anything better to talk about than getting prepared to go back to school because we really want to help our children. Just set them up for success, not only academically, but mentally, emotionally, socially, and all of that. So that was why I wanted to start off with this topic. As always, please follow me at the Parenting 411 on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Tell your friends to like and subscribe the podcast. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, most places where you go to hear your favorite podcast. We have a great season planned for you. Lots of authors and other experts like Taharka today that have so much to share that will enhance the well-being of your family. So I hope you will continue to tune in. Thank you again. And I can't wait to talk to you soon. And remember, it's never too late to be the parent that you want to be.
That's right. Thank you.